You probably use some form of AI this week. I mean, think about it for a second.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has at this point.
Right, like maybe you were just staring at a completely blank screen, trying to figure out how to start this really difficult professional email.
The worst feeling.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you just asked a bot to generate a first draft.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you were updating a resume, or you used one of those tools on your phone to magically erase a photobomber from a vacation picture.
Yeah, the magic erasure stuff, it's everywhere.
It really is. And when you did it, you probably felt this little rush because it feels like a superpower.
Oh, for sure. It feels incredible.
Yeah, it's just a few keystrokes and suddenly you are operating so much faster. You sound more articulate and your problems just seem to, instantly resolve themselves. But we're doing a deep dive today into a really fascinating question. What if that exact same superpower is actually a cognitive crutch?
Right. A crutch that's, essentially doing the work for you.
Exactly. What if it is slowly and silently and very efficiently erasing the very things that make your mind and your creative voice and, well, your identity completely unique?
I mean, it is the defining paradox of the current technological era. We are just happily handing over the heavy lifting of our daily lives to these incredibly frictionless systems.
You're giving it all away.
We really are.
Yeah.
But we almost never stop to measure what happens to our own muscles, both our cognitive muscles and our cultural muscles, when we simply stop using them.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. We have this massive stack of sources for today's deep dive, and our mission is to really unpack exactly how this technology is simultaneously amplifying our capabilities, to just unprecedented levels while actively threatening our individuality.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
It is. We're going to look at everything from the psychology of learning and the bizarre homogenization of corporate speech to the future of visual art. And we'll look at the silent erasure of religious identity in commercial apps, too.
Which is just a staggering study, by the way.
It really is. I can't wait to get to that. And finally, we're going to look at human-machine competition through the eyes of someone who knows it better than anyone, chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov.
And, I think we should establish the parameters of this conversation right from the jump. This is not going to be some simplistic debate about whether artificial intelligence is, quote-unquote, good or bad.
Right, because that's just not helpful anymore.
No, that binary is entirely useless now. It's here. So what we're really examining is how this technology fundamentally rewires our relationship with friction.
Friction. That's such a key word here.
It is the key word. Because biological life, human learning, creativity, they all require friction. Friction is literally the resistance we push against to grow.
Right, like lifting weights.
Exactly like lifting weights. So when you introduce a technology whose primary function is to eliminate friction entirely, the downstream consequences are just monumental.
Okay, so let's look at that concept of friction, and let's start with the most immediate application in your daily life, which is productivity and learning.
Yeah, this is where everyone is feeling it right now.
For sure. So we have this piece by Sarah O'Connor from the Financial Times, and she uses this physical analogy that I think just clarifies this perfectly. She compares interacting with AI to strapping on a physical exoskeleton.
Like a bionic suit.
Exactly. Think of a bionic suit or even just a really powerful e-bike.
Oh, it is an incredibly precise mechanical metaphor. I mean, if you have ever been on an e-bike on a steep incline, you know exactly that sensation she's talking about.
Oh my gosh, yes. You pedal just slightly, the motor kicks in, and you get this massive, effortless surge taking you to the top of the hill.
Right. You didn't really earn the speed, but you absolutely get to enjoy it.
You do. And O'Connor points out that as human beings age, we might actually increasingly rely on literal robotic exoskeletons, like bionic hip belts or leg braces to help us maintain our mobility when our biological muscles begin to fail.
Which is amazing technology.
It is. For someone in their 80s, that robotic assistance is a miracle. It preserves their quality of life. But she flips the scenario entirely and asks a really provocative question. She asks, who is the absolute worst demographic to give a robotic exoskeleton to?
Children.
Right.
Because a child's muscular and skeletal systems are in active development. They literally require the physical friction of gravity, the struggle of standing up, the resistance of walking, to actually build bone density and muscle
Right.
mass.
If you don't use it, you don't build it.
Exactly. If you place a toddler in a robotic exoskeleton that just does all the walking for them, their biological muscles will literally atrophy. They will never develop that baseline autonomous strength that they need to navigate the physical world on their own.
Wow.
And so O'Connor's core thesis here is that artificial intelligence is currently functioning as an exoskeleton for the mind. And we are just handing it out to people whose cognitive muscles are still forming.
And she brings in some really heavy quantitative data to back this up, too. She looks at an experiment that was conducted with consultants at Boston Consulting Group.
Right? BCG. Top tier.
Yeah, these are not children. These are highly educated, elite professionals. So the researchers divided them up, gave some of them access to AI tools, and gave them these complex, unfamiliar tasks to do.
And the results were pretty striking.
Very striking. Unsurprisingly, the consultants using the AI massively outperformed the others. They generated faster work, higher quality work. They look like absolute prodigies.
Right, the e-bike effect in action.
Exactly. But then the researchers added a secondary phase to the experiment. They took the AI exoskeleton away and they tested them again.
And that is exactly where the illusion collapsed. The researchers found that once the AI was removed, those consultants retained virtually zero independent knowledge of the new skills they had seemingly just mastered.
Wait, literally zero? I
Hmm.
mean, surely just reading the AI's output and interacting with it creates some kind of mental retention, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't just read an entire brilliant analysis and absorb absolutely nothing.
You actually can if you are not actively wrestling with the underlying logic.
Really?
Yeah, the capability was entirely housed within the servers running the machine. It wasn't within the human brain at all. The human simply acted as, like, a biological router.
Biological router, that's bleak.
It is. They were just passing the prompt to the machine and then passing the machine's output to the client. There was no internal synthesis happening whatsoever.
Oh, wow. And this gets even more concerning when you look at how this impacts actual students in an academic environment.
Yeah.
Like, O'Connor highlights this massive study involving nearly 27,000 Chinese university students.
Yes, this study is so important.
It's huge. The researchers rigorously tracked what happened when these students adopted AI tools to help them with their coursework, specifically in computer science and coding. And the short-term result was exactly what you would expect. Their homework scores shot way up. But when it came time for the heavily proctored, in-person, no AI final exams, their scores plummeted significantly.
And the mechanism behind those dropping exam scores is probably the most revealing part of the entire study. I mean, if you had interviewed those university students, they would have told you with complete sincerity that they were using the large language model as a personalized tutor.
Right, they thought they were learning.
They genuinely felt like they had, a senior software engineer sitting right at their elbow, patiently guiding them through all these complex algorithms.
Which is the dream, right? I mean, every education startup right now is pitching AI as the ultimate, infinitely patient tutor that's going to completely democratize elite education.
Oh, it sounds idyllic until you actually look at the raw data. Because the researchers didn't just ask the students how they felt, they analyzed the actual interaction logs.
Oh, they look at the back end?
Exactly. They looked at the literal keystrokes, the timestamps, and the very specific prompts the students were feeding into the LLM. And what they found completely shattered that whole tutor narrative.
What did they find?
They observed a behavior that they termed transactional delegation.
Transactional delegation. Okay, that sounds like corporate speak for just handing your job to someone else. What does it actually look like on a student's keyboard?
It looks like a student copying the exact text of their homework assignment, pasting it into the chat box as a single one-shot imperative prompt, waiting maybe 3 seconds, and then rapidly copying and pasting the generated code block directly into their assignment file.
Oh, wow. So no dialogue at all.
None. There was no Socratic dialogue. The students were not asking the AI, hey, why did you use a for loop here instead of a while loop? They were not probing the underlying syntax. They were basically treating the AI like a vending machine for correct answers.
Hold on, can we really blame the students for this? I mean, if the tool exists and it gives you the right answer in 3 seconds, why wouldn't you use it?
It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. And doesn't it make sense to offload the rote memorization of coding syntax so you can, I don't know, focus on bigger picture problem solving?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people argue that the traditional sit-down exam is completely outdated anyway.
That is a very common argument right now, yeah.
It just feels a bit like locking an accounting student in a room forbidding them from using a calculator and testing them on long division. If the exoskeleton exists in the real world, why are we punishing students for using it in the classroom?
That is the dominant counterargument, but O'Connor really deconstructs why that calculator analogy fundamentally fails when you apply it to generative AI.
Okay, why does it fail?
Because a calculator automates arithmetic, right?
Right.
Which is a deterministic process. It's just math. AI automates synthesis, which is a cognitive process. The fatal flaw in the argument is the assumption that you can somehow think critically about a subject that you know absolutely nothing about.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, critical thinking is not some floating, abstract skill that you can just apply to any domain without context.
So it's like you can't be an effective architectural critic if you don't fundamentally understand the laws of physics and load-bearing walls.
That's a perfect example. Exactly. You need an internal scaffolding of domain-specific knowledge to even know what questions to ask. And we can actually look at the current labor market to see this playing out in real time right now.
Oh, really? What's happening?
Well, if the theory was correct that AI makes foundational coding knowledge obsolete, then the demand for human programmers should be plummeting right now across the board. But what we are actually seeing is a massive spike in demand for highly experienced senior software developers, while entry-level junior roles are the ones disappearing.
Wait, why is that? If the AI can write the code, shouldn't a junior developer paired with an AI be enough to get the job done?
You would think so, but no. Because a junior developer lacks the foundational expertise to catch the machine's inevitable errors. And large language models hallucinate.
Oh, right. They make things up.
Constantly. They confidently invent software libraries that don't even exist, or they introduce these really subtle, catastrophic security vulnerabilities into the code base.
Yikes.
Yeah. So if you use the AI to bypass the friction of learning the basics, you're going to blindly accept a piece of code that could crash an entire server infrastructure. You have to be an absolute expert to safely supervise these systems. You cannot manage a machine if you don't deeply understand the work it is actually doing.
Okay, so then how do we force people to build that internal scaffolding? Especially if the machine is constantly sitting right there offering this incredibly tempting, frictionless bypass.
Well, O'Connor points to this really brilliant insight from education director Daisy Christodoulou, and she uses an analogy from the world of professional chess, which completely reframes how we should view exams.
Chess, okay.
Yeah, so today, every single elite chess player in the world uses AI chess engines like Stankfish to prepare for matches. The AI calculates millions of variations and shows them the absolute optimal moves. The technology undeniably makes them better players.
Sure, they study with it.
Right. But here is the critical distinction. The grandmasters never use the AI as a crutch during their actual cognitive training because their ultimate goal is to sit down at a physical board across from another human being in a strictly enforced no-technology competition.
Ah, so the exam conditions, the physical board, the ticking clock, the total absence of the machine, those constraints are what actually force the brain to do the real work.
Yes, exactly. The purpose of a closed book, no AI exam, isn't to simulate a real-world working environment where you wouldn't have access to tools. Nobody thinks that. The exam is actually a biological enforcement mechanism.
A biological enforcement mechanism.
Yeah. It is the only way to force your brain to endure the metabolic cost and the immense friction required to physically forge new neural pathways. If you know the exoskeleton is going to be there to carry you up the hill, your brain is highly efficient. It will simply refuse to expend the energy to build the muscle.
That makes so much sense. So if AI removes the friction of learning in the classroom, what happens when it removes the friction of communication in the professional world?
This is where it gets really noticeable.
Yeah. Let's say you already have your neural pathways built, you are an expert, but now you start using the machine to write your emails, draft your memos, write your speeches. This brings us to this fascinating piece by Sanjay Pugalia, who experienced this exact phenomenon of stylistic flattening firsthand.
Yes. This is where we move from the unseen atrophy of the mind, which is hidden, to the highly visible homogenization of our entire culture.
And Pugalia tells this incredibly relatable story. So he is attending a major high-level business conference in India, and he's sitting in the audience preparing to listen to some of the most experienced, dynamic leaders in the entire country.
People with real vision.
Right. Now, historically, at an event like this, you get a massive variety of rhetorical styles. You have the aggressive visionary, you have the quiet analytical thinker, the folksy storyteller.
A real mix of human personalities.
Exactly. But as the day went on, Puglia started feeling this creeping sense of unease. He realized that every single speech, regardless of the speaker's actual personality, was following the exact same rhythmic template.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They all built tension in the exact same way, and they all landed on these oddly identical, profound-sounding conclusions.
So they were completely losing their individual rhetorical friction,
Yeah.
like the thing that makes them sound like themselves.
Yes. And he actually pinpointed the exact structural patterns they were using. He calls them contrast framing constructions. And for you listening, I have to warn you, once you hear this, it is going to absolutely ruin LinkedIn for you forever because it is everywhere.
It's so true. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right. So it's this specific phrasing like, this is not a challenge, it is an opportunity. Or, India is not a market, it is a mission. The question is no longer whether, but how.
Or our goal is not just profit, but purpose.
Yes.
It is a highly, highly specific grammatical architecture.
It drives you crazy once you notice it. Because the first time you hear an executive look out over a crowd and say, manufacturing is not about factories, it is about sovereignty, you might sit there and think, wow, that is incredibly insightful.
Right, it sounds very profound.
It does. But by the 40th time you hear that exact cadence applied to a completely different industry, you realize a statistical engine generated it. Piglia points out that these phrases have just become linguistic furniture. They're in every annual report, every press release, every single corporate email. But why? Like, why does the AI always default to this specific tone?
To understand that, we really have to look under the hood at the mathematics of how large language models actually function. We have this tendency to anthropomorphize these systems, right? By saying they write or they think.
Right, we treat them like little people in the computer.
Yeah, exactly. But they do neither of those things. They are basically unfathomably complex prediction engines. Their entire function, their only function, is to calculate the highest statistical probability for the very next token or word fragment in a sequence based on the billions of parameters in their training data.
So they're essentially just playing the world's most advanced game of autocomplete.
Precisely. That is exactly what they're doing. And because their goal is mathematical probability, they are structurally designed to be statistically average, not original.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, if an AI looks at millions of human speeches in its data set, and it sees that highly influential people, politicians, CEOs, TED Talk speakers, frequently use the construction not just X, but also Y, the model mathematically assigns that structure a massive probability score.
Because it works.
Right. It calculates that this is the absolute safest, most reliable way to sound persuasive. Words like transformation, ecosystem, and future-ready have immense statistical gravity in corporate data sets.
So it creates this closed-loop echo chamber of jargon. The AI absorbs all of our corporate cliches. It feeds them back to us in a slightly more polished format. We proudly publish them online. And then the next generation of AI scrapes the internet and trains on that newly generated text, pulling the statistical average even tighter.
It is a race to the absolute middle.
It really is. Reading this, a metaphor immediately jumped into my head. Using generative AI to write your communications is exactly like using corporate auto-tune.
Oh, wow. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the mechanism.
Right. Because if you look at the music industry, auto-tune takes a singer's raw, fluctuating vocal track, and it mathematically snaps every single note onto the perfectly correct pitch.
Right. It eliminates the errors.
Yeah, it instantly fixes your off-key notes, which is great. But in the process of snapping everything to that flawless mathematical grid, it strips out all the microfluctuations. It removes the natural vibrato, the slight breathiness, the tiny imperfections that actually give a human voice its emotional resonance.
It makes it sterile.
Exactly. And AI writing does the exact same thing to our thoughts. It snaps your rambling grammar onto a perfect structural grid. It fixes your dangling modifiers. But it completely strips out the soul. You end up with a room full of highly intelligent, unique professionals who all sound like a lineup of identical, heavily focused grouped pop stars.
And this brings us to what Puglia identifies as the deeper, more insidious thinking problem.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, the danger isn't just that AI makes bad writers sound generic. The real danger is that it dresses up incredibly weak, shallow ideas in the camouflage of profound competence.
Well, that's dangerous.
It is. Because human writing, genuine human thought on a page, is the direct byproduct of friction.
What does that friction actually look like on the page, though? Like, practically?
Practically, it looks like hesitation. When you read a human being actively working through a complex, difficult idea, you can feel them stumbling on the page. You encounter a sentence that meanders slightly, or an argument that takes a sudden pause to acknowledge a counterpoint, or even admit its own uncertainty. Those structural flaws are the proof that a human mind is actively engaging with the unknown.
Right. They're working it out in real time.
Exactly. AI writing, by contrast, is completely frictionless. It arrives fully formed, supremely confident, and structurally flawless. Every single paragraph strains for this profound mic drop moment, regardless of whether the underlying idea actually merits it. It basically provides the illusion of depth without the metabolic cost of deep thought.
So how do you avoid falling into the auto-tune trap if you're a professional trying to use these tools?
Pugalia offers a very practical heuristic for the listener here. Before you ever hit generate on an AI writing tool, you have to force yourself to answer one question.
What's the question?
What do I know? What do I see? Or what have I experienced that this machine cannot possibly access?
Oh, I love that.
Right, because if you are just asking it to summarize industry trends, you will get statistical homogenization every time. You have to inject your own unique friction, your personal anecdotes, your highly specific domain knowledge into the process.
Okay, so if the mathematical smoothing of AI strips the necessary friction out of the written word, we have to ask what that exact same smoothing process does to visual reality.
This is a huge shift, yeah.
Because if AI text homogenizes thought, does AI art homogenize aesthetics? We're looking at a piece by Tim Brinkoff next, and he explores this incredible existential crisis that is facing visual artists today.
And Brinkoff provides a phenomenal historical parallel that I think proves this kind of technological panic is actually not new. To predict where art is going in the age of generative AI, we have to look back at what happened in Paris in the mid-19th century.
I found this story so fascinating. He tells this story about the French historical painter Paul Delaroche, and this is in 1839. Delaroche is presented with a daguerreotype, which is, one of the very first photographs.
Right, brand new technology at the time.
Brand new. And he stares at this silver-plated sheet of copper that has captured a perfect, objective, hyper-detailed likeness of a street scene. It has perfect lighting, perfect perspective, and zero brushstrokes.
Flawless reality.
Flawless. And Delaroche famously declares right on the spot, "From today, painting is dead."
Because if the sole purpose of art was the objective replication of reality, the machine had just won permanently.
Exactly. Why paint a portrait if a machine can just flash and capture reality perfectly? But, as we know, painting obviously didn't die.
No, it didn't.
Instead, the invention of the camera forced visual art to fundamentally evolve. Human artists realized they could not compete with the frictionless, instantaneous realism of the machine. So they retreated into the one realm the camera couldn't access, which was human subjectivity.
Right, the internal experience.
Yes. The camera essentially birthed the modern art movements. It forced the creation of Impressionism, where artists like Monet started painting not the objective light, but their emotional, fleeting perception of the light. It led to Cubism, where Picasso fractured reality to show multiple perspectives at once. Artists survived by asking, what can I do that the machine mathematically cannot?
And Brinkoff maps this exact historical pivot onto the present day. Generative AI image models, like Midjourney or DALL-E, they are the new camera, but infinitely more powerful.
Right.
Right now, in these relatively early stages, human artists can still spot the AI's flaws. We actively look for the hallucinations, right? We look for the hands with 6 fingers, or the surreal architectural blending in the background, or the nonsensical text on a sign.
Yeah, that's how we know it's fake.
Exactly. But Brinkoff projects that within a very short window, the AI will stop hallucinating entirely. It will mathematically perfect the generation of pixels. It will be able to create genuinely profound, conceptually layered, technically flawless masterpieces from just a simple text prompt.
So when the machine inevitably achieves absolute aesthetic perfection, where do the human artists go? If they can't do Impressionism again, what's left?
According to Brinkoff, they have to go in the exact opposite direction. When perfection becomes cheap and instant and abundant, human artists will only survive by deliberately making their art worse.
Okay, we need to clarify what worse means here, because he isn't saying artists will just start producing garbage.
No, no, not garbage. He means art that is deliberately and visibly incompetent in its mechanical execution. Art that is proudly flawed, rough, unpolished, and raw.
Leaving the friction visible.
Exactly. Imagine a future where the most highly valued novels are the ones published as messy first drafts, complete with typos, crossed-out sentences, and margin notes.
Oh.
Or think of art galleries that refuse to display hyper-realistic oil paintings and instead only showcase rough, smudged, half-erased charcoal sketches where you can see the literal physical struggle of the artist's hand on the paper.
That is such a wild concept.
But it makes sense, because AI can generate hyperrealism instantly. Slickness and high production value will become culturally coded as cheap or artificial. Mistakes, stumbles, and structural roughness will become the ultimate luxury metric. The error itself becomes the authentication of human origin.
Brinkoff also makes a really fascinating point about artistic style. He argues that artists are going to have to abandon the idea of having a single consistent visual brand.
Which goes against everything artists are taught today.
It totally does. Because right now, the one thing AI is incredibly good at is mimicking a recognizable aesthetic. If I want an image of a cyberpunk city, but I want it drawn in the exact style of an old Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, the AI can do that instantly.
Right, because there is a massive, highly consistent data set of Bill Watterson's work for it to train on.
Exactly. But the AI struggles profoundly when it tries to map the trajectory of an artist who constantly reinvents their own rules. Brinkoff points to visionary animators like Richard Williams or Satoshi Kon. These were creators who just refused to be locked into a single visual look. They evolved wildly from project to project.
They keep moving.
Yeah. And in the age of generative models, having an original style is no longer enough to protect you because your originality will just be scraped and turned into a prompt filter. The new goal is inimitability. You literally have to become a moving target.
And you can actually see this specific aesthetic shift happening right now.
Oh, totally. I see it on platforms like YouTube all the time. Brinkoff mentions the evolution of the video essay. For the last 10 years, the gold standard for a successful YouTube creator was hyper-slick production.
Oh, yeah. The Mr. Beast style.
Exactly. You wanted tightly scripted, perfectly edited voiceovers, absolutely seamless transitions, expensive color grading, and you literally edited out every single breath or pause to maximize audience retention.
It was so fast-paced.
But now that AI generation tools can replicate that exact optimized aesthetic instantly and for free, top human creators are actively abandoning it.
So what are they replacing it with?
They are reverting to raw, unedited, straight-to-camera monologues. Like they are sitting on the floor of a messy room, talking directly into the lens and deliberately leaving in the long pauses, the stutters, the moments where they lose their train of thought and have to check their notes.
Really?
Yes, they are intentionally degrading their own production value. It is the only way they can signal through the noise of the algorithm and tell the viewer, look at my flaws. I am a real human being.
The irony there is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, human beings have spent centuries building institutions and academies and tools to help us achieve artistic perfection and eliminate our flaws. And now at the exact historical moment that we have engineered a machine capable of flawless execution, we are desperately trying to remain amateurs just to prove we have a pulse.
It is a profound inversion of aesthetics. It really is. But we have to recognize that deliberate artistic flaws are a luxury. It is a choice an artist makes.
That's a good point.
Yeah. We need to pivot to what happens when this exact same algorithmic preference for perfect, frictionless outputs begins silently and involuntarily editing human beings in the real world. We are moving from the realm of aesthetic theory to a deeply concerning reality regarding ethical harm and the erasure of cultural identity.
This is a crucial pivot.
Right.
We're looking at this deeply unsettling reporting by Mohsen Salim Ullah, and he's focusing on the work of Dr. Mawish Malazam in Pakistan. And honestly, this completely changed how I view everyday algorithmic bias.
It's a very sobering study.
It is, because when we talk about AI harm, we usually focus on massive, dramatic things.
Yeah.
Deep fakes being used to sway elections or massive copyright infringement. But Dr. Malazam focused on something completely mundane. Commercial AI headshot applications.
Right. The kind of app you see advertised constantly on social media.
Everywhere.
You pay $5, you upload 10 selfies from your camera roll, and the app uses a diffusion model to generate a polished, highly professional portrait for your LinkedIn profile or your corporate directory.
Exactly. Millions of people use them. But Dr. Mozam is a Muslim woman who wears a hijab. And she spent a year systematically testing her photos across more than 25 different commercial AI headshot platforms.
A very rigorous test.
Very rigorous.
Yeah.
And the critical finding was incredibly consistent and completely chilling. Time and time again, across almost all of these platforms, the AI silently removed her hijab in the final generated images, replacing it with digitally rendered hair, completely without her permission.
Wow. And this specific failure forces us to really confront and hopefully dismantle the pervasive myth of algorithmic neutrality. There is this deeply ingrained public belief that because technology operates on mathematics, it must be inherently impartial, right? It's just numbers. But an algorithm is nothing more than a reflection of its training data. And training data is deeply embedded with the unconscious assumptions of its developers and the cultural biases of the society it was scraped from.
Ula points out a detail about the user interface of these apps that really highlights the structural blindness here. When you onboard into these apps, you often get pop-ups asking for your preferences. The app will literally ask, do you want to keep your glasses in the final image, or do you want to retain your facial hair?
So it's capable of asking.
Exactly. It recognizes those physical traits as important variables to protect. But not a single one of the 25 apps tested had a checkbox asking for explicit consent to remove or alter religious headwear.
To understand how this happens, we really have to look at how a generative model mathematically defines a concept like professionalism. The AI doesn't have a dictionary definition of the word. It doesn't know what professionalism means. It relies entirely on clustering data.
Okay, so how does it cluster that?
Well, when the developers tell the model to learn what a professional headshot looks like, they feed it millions of images scraped from corporate websites and professional networking platforms. And because the global corporate environment is heavily skewed toward Western cultural norms, the statistical majority of those images feature people in suits without religious headwear.
Right.
Therefore, the mathematical weight of the pixels representing a hijab falls outside the algorithm's cluster of professional. The AI isn't malicious. It doesn't hate the hijab. It is just optimizing. It views the hijab not as a fundamental pillar of human identity, but as a non-standard visual artifact that deviates from the statistical mean. So in its blind pursuit of frictionless perfection, it simply edits it out.
But the result of that mathematical optimization is profound cultural violence. It silently enforces a single homogeneous visual standard and enacts religious exclusion on a massive scale. And for you, the listener, I think the most alarming part of this is how fundamentally defenseless the user is against this kind of passive erasure.
You're completely at the mercy of the model.
Right, because if a company actively discriminated against someone's religion, there are clear legal frameworks for that. But what do you do when the company just shrugs and calls it a technical artifact or an unintended hallucination?
You fall directly into a massive legal black hole. Ula outlines the jurisdictional nightmare of this technology, and it's dizzying. Consider the geography of this specific harm. You have a user located in Pakistan who uploads her photo to a mobile application. That application was likely coded by a startup based in San Francisco.
Okay.
The actual image processing is happening on a rented cloud server located in Ireland, and the foundational AI model generating the image was trained on a dataset scraped from the global internet.
So when her religious identity is stripped away, who is legally accountable?
No one currently knows. Where does the harm actually occur? Is it in Pakistan, San Francisco, or Ireland? Ula notes that Pakistan is actually developing a 2025 national AI policy, and they do have existing cybercrime laws.
But do they cover this?
No, because those frameworks were designed for the internet of 10 years ago. They are built to prosecute active intentional malice, someone hacking your account or deliberately generating a deepfake to blackmail you. Current laws are completely unequipped to handle situations where an AI system silently, passively modifies a person's core cultural identity during a routine image optimization process.
Because there's no malicious intent to prove.
Exactly. The violation of dignity happens in 3 seconds of rendering time, but finding a legal remedy across 3 different international jurisdictions is effectively impossible right now.
So we can't just accept that the algorithm is going to aggressively westernize the digital world. What are the structural solutions Ula proposes here?
It requires a fundamental shift in how we regulate digital consent. Ula points out that first, we need mandatory, explicit disclosure from the platforms regarding exactly how their models might alter physical appearance.
Right, they have to tell you what they might do.
Yes. Second, There must be a requirement for explicit opt-in user consent before an algorithm is permitted to alter any recognized markers of cultural, racial, or religious expression. A toggle switch for reading glasses is totally insufficient when dealing with core identity.
Absolutely.
And finally, it requires the establishment of robust cross-border data protection treaties that legally recognize involuntary digital identity modification as a tangible violation of human rights. We simply cannot allow the relentless drive for frictionless technological innovation to supersede basic human autonomy.
It is incredibly sobering. I mean, we have looked at how AI struggles with the necessary friction of human learning, how it flattens the nuance of human writing, and how its statistical dataset completely fails to grasp the vital cultural context of human identity.
Right, it constantly prefers the mathematically smooth over the humanly complex.
Yes. So to understand why these massive blind spots exist at the core of artificial intelligence, we are turning to an interview with someone who has spent the last 30 years directly competing against the absolute cutting edge of machine computation.
We are looking at a conversation with the legendary chess grandmaster, Garry Kasparov.
Now, Kasparov's history here is vital to understand. In 1997, he famously sat across from IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer, and he lost. He was the reigning human world champion, and the machine beat him.
A huge moment in history.
It was. So you would logically assume that Kasparov would be the ultimate pessimist about the future of humanity in the face of machines. Yet, in his interview with Damir Maruzic, he argues the exact opposite. He claims we are spending way too much time terrified by what machines can do and nowhere near enough time understanding the fundamental limits of what they cannot do.
And Kasparov's perspective is really anchored in a concept from computer science known as Moravec's paradox, which is absolutely essential for understanding the current reality of AI, looking beyond all the marketing hype.
Right.
Moravec's paradox basically states that what human beings perceive as highly complex, difficult cognitive tasks are actually incredibly easy for an AI. Conversely, what human beings perceive as effortless, basic actions are virtually impossible for an AI to replicate.
Break down the mechanics of that paradox for us. Why is that the case?
Well, think about the physics of reality versus the mathematics of a game. Playing grandmaster-level chess or, calculating orbital mechanics requires immense, focused, cognitive strain for a human. We associate those tasks with high intelligence.
Sure, you have to be a genius to do them.
Right. But for a computer, chess is simply a bounded mathematical environment. It has fixed rules, a finite 64-square grid, and a perfectly defined win state. It is a closed system, which makes it computationally trivial for a machine. On the other hand, consider a human toddler.
Okay.
A toddler can walk across a cluttered living room, instantly recognize their mother's face regardless of the lighting conditions, and reach out to pick up an irregularly shaped toy.
Which feels completely effortless to us. We don't even think about it.
Exactly. Because that effortless movement is the result of millions of years of evolutionary sensorimotor processing. The human brain is unconsciously calculating infinite variables, gravity, friction, light occlusion, spatial geometry. For an AI, replicating the open-world adaptability of that toddler requires calculating an infinite, unbounded reality. It is extraordinarily difficult.
And this brings us to the core philosophical question Kasparov raises, which is, what exactly is the intelligence in artificial intelligence?
Right. Kasparov accurately points out that we are attempting to build artificial superintelligence when we do not even have a consensus on how biological human intelligence actually functions.
It's wild when you think about it that way.
It is. He references the debates of 17th century philosophers like Descartes and Spinoza, who argued over whether the mind operates independently of the physical body. If consciousness requires a physical body experiencing the friction of the real world, a machine isolated in a server farm can never achieve it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And Kasparov notes that even the titans driving the current AI boom, people like Demis Hassabis at Google DeepMind, Jan LeCun at Meta, and philosopher Nick Bostrom, they are increasingly acknowledging that we are hitting a wall. The massive leaks we have seen the last few years are almost entirely the result of brute force computation. We are just throwing exponentially more data and massive clusters of GPUs at the models.
But Kasparov is saying that brute force calculation doesn't eventually magically ignite into a soul or true cognition.
Exactly. Scaling up a calculator does not eventually create a philosopher.
Kasparov uses this phenomenal analogy to illustrate this limitation, and he pulls it from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, this is such a good analogy.
It's so perfect. In Douglas Adams' book, this hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional species builds a supercomputer the size of a planet to calculate the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything. The computer churns away for millions of years, and finally it spits out the answer, 42.
A purely numerical output.
Right. And the profound punchline of the joke is that they have the ultimate answer, but nobody knows what the actual question was. Kasparov argues this perfectly encapsulates the current state of generative AI. An AI can parse billions of data points and spit out the mathematically optimal 42. It can generate the code, write the speech, or optimize the supply chain.
Right.
But it requires a human being possessing human values and human context to know which questions are actually worth asking. Kasparov makes this fascinating point regarding theology. He says an AI can read every religious text ever written in milliseconds, but it cannot decide if the Bible or the Quran is the holier book.
Because it's not a math problem.
Exactly. Because the machine lacks human ethics, historical context, and a soul. It only possesses mathematical weights. Human data is wonderfully messy, contradictory, and corrupt in the sense that the friction of human existence never yields a clean mathematical answer.
The machine provides the velocity, but only the human element can provide the vector, the moral direction of the calculation.
Now, Kasparov expands this philosophy into the geopolitical arena. And just to be clear for the listener, we're just reporting Kasparov's views here from the source text.
Right, absolutely.
So Kasparov looks at the speed of current AI development, and he addresses the massive anxieties surrounding it. He notes reports that political figures, including Donald Trump, exerted pressure on major AI labs like OpenAI and Anthropic to pause or slow down the release of their most advanced models due to safety concerns.
Right. But Kasparov completely dismisses the Hollywood narrative of the threat. He argues that the danger is not the machine spontaneously waking up and deciding to eradicate humanity like Skynet. The true immediate danger is highly capable AI tools falling into the hands of human bad actors who will use the technology as an amplifier for existing societal destruction.
Because bad actors already exist.
Exactly. It is always mathematically easier to destroy a system than to build one. And historically, he points out, the ultimate accelerator of technological deployment is not academic curiosity, it is war. Right now, the most consequential application of AI is not generating marketing copy. It is the real-time targeting algorithms in autonomous military drones.
This leads directly into his broader historical thesis regarding technology and governance, which is incredibly compelling. Kasparov argues that in any prolonged technological race, free, open societies will inevitably defeat unfree, centralized, authoritarian societies.
He uses the technological arms race of World War II as his definitive case study for this. During that conflict, every major global power was pouring the entirety of their economic output and scientific brainpower into developing the technology required to win. The stakes were absolute. But look at where the true world-altering breakthroughs occurred. The computing and cryptography revolution happened in the decentralized, collaborative environment of Bletchley Park in the UK. The atomic revolution happened via the Manhattan Project in the US. The unfree societies simply could not keep pace.
And he specifically notes why Hitler's regime failed technologically. It wasn't a lack of resources, it was an embedded structural failure of their ideology. The Nazi regime's rigid, hateful dogma forced them to purge and expel brilliant Jewish scientists, fundamentally sabotaging their own intellectual capacity. Kasparov's point is that a closed, authoritarian system inherently bleeds brainpower because it demands ideological purity over open inquiry.
And Kasparov applies this exact historical framework to observe the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Kasparov closely follows the internal communications of Russian military bloggers, and he notes their bitter complaints regarding the technology gap on the battlefield.
What are they complaining about?
The bloggers are expressing immense frustration that Ukraine's highly agile, decentralized, grassroots drone innovation is consistently outmaneuvering Russia's rigid, top-down, centralized military-industrial complex.
Break down the mechanics of that innovation gap. Like, why does decentralization win in tech?
It basically comes down to the logistics of fiction and failure. In the Ukrainian model, a small unit of soldiers or engineers on the ground can tinker with commercial drone parts, test a new frequency hopping algorithm, fail 3 times in a day, figure out a solution by sunset, and deploy it the next morning. They have the autonomy to innovate at the edge.
That's incredible speed.
Right. But in the Russian system, Kasparov notes, a new idea has to travel up a massive, corrupt chain of command. A general in Moscow has to approve it, a centralized factory has to retool to build it, and by the time the technology actually reaches the front lines 6 months later, the technological landscape has already shifted, rendering it totally obsolete.
Kasparov's profound synthesis here is that technological supremacy requires relentless creativity.
Mhm.
But you cannot mathematically generate creativity in an environment where people are terrified of making mistakes.
Exactly.
Centralized, unfree systems operate entirely on fear and top-down control. They demand certainty. They want to predict exactly which technology will be the ultimate winner before they allocate any resources. But true innovation requires the absolute freedom to experiment, the freedom to stumble, the freedom to experience the friction of the unknown, and crucially, the freedom to fail without facing a firing squad.
He even ventures a geopolitical prediction based on this asymmetric tech advantage. He posits that if Ukraine continues to leverage this agile tech to strategically isolate the Crimean Peninsula, which Kasparov describes as the ideological umbilical cord of Vladimir Putin's imperial mindset, the resulting pressure could trigger the collapse of the regime. Yeah, and he notes the dark irony that this cascading failure might actually achieve the Trump administration's stated objective of ending the conflict just through mechanisms entirely outside of their political control.
That is a fascinating perspective.
It is. The overarching lesson Kasparov leaves us with is that human freedom, the freedom to ask the right questions, the freedom to operate outside of centralized authority, and the freedom to endure the friction of our own mistakes is the ultimate insurmountable advantage we hold over both artificial intelligence and authoritarian systems.
Wow. Okay, let's pull all of these threads together and bring this deep dive full circle, because we opened by asking a simple question. When you use AI, are you wielding a superpower, or are you leaning on a cognitive crutch? And looking across all these diverse sources, a very clear, very unified through line emerges.
It really does. The pattern is absolutely undeniable.
Whether we are analyzing the e-bike exoskeleton that tempts university students to bypass the metabolic cost of learning, or the statistically perfect corporate templates that make brilliant executives sound like identical robots. Whether we are looking at the AI image generators that are forcing human artists to embrace unpolished roughness, or the commercial headshot apps that silently erase a woman's hijab because it doesn't fit the mathematical average. Artificial intelligence is, at its core, a statistical perfection engine. Its primary directive is to smooth out all the edges and eliminate friction entirely.
And in its relentless pursuit of frictionless optimization, the machine has inadvertently illuminated the true, irreplaceable value of the human being.
Yeah.
Our core value is not, and never again will be, our ability to rapidly calculate the correct word, or execute flawless coding syntax, or generate a hyper-realistic image. Our absolute value is located entirely in our friction. It is in our biological stumbles, our highly specific cultural context, our unpredictable leaps of logic, and our fundamental freedom to experiment and fail.
So as you step away from this deep dive and go back to your day, and the very next time you open up a generative AI tool to help you draft an email or outline a proposal or edit a photograph, I want you to remember this conversation. Protect your friction. Actively embrace your stumbles. When you write, inject your own unique, messy, highly specific experiences into the text. Defend your distinctive identity against the incredibly powerful tide of statistical homogenization.
Do not allow the exoskeleton to atrophy the cognitive and cultural muscles that define exactly who you are. The machine can endlessly calculate the optimal 42, but it requires your humanity to know what question actually matters.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly unnerving thought to mull over as we wrap up today. Something that wasn't directly stated in any of our source material, but feels like the inevitable next step in this arms race.
Oh.
Yeah. If we all actually follow this advice, if human artists start deliberately creating flawed, messy, inchoate art, and if human writers start intentionally injecting awkward stumbles, pauses, and friction into their work just to prove their authenticity and humanity to the audience, won't the very next generation of large language models and diffusion models just scrape and train on that new data?
Oh, yes, they would.
Will the AI of 2035 learn how to perfectly and mathematically mimic human incompetence? And if the machine eventually learns how to flawlessly fake our flaws, what exactly will we have to do to prove we're human then?